So, thank you guys for having us. I really got to say that Bill has been a fantastic host. Host, chauffeur, whatever you want to call him. He's
Tour
just-
guide.
Tour guide. He's been awesome. And we did get to take a tour with a couple of cadets. Hey,
Hello, sorry.
that's all right. Only,
No.
the cadets that gave us a tour were awesome too. It was really good. So, I mean, we've had a full day and a half of meetings with her. I'm sure all of you probably saw bits and pieces of the schedule. But it's been a full day and we've gotten a lot of robust feedback. So did all of you get a chance to take a look at the survey results and or the notebook LM? So, okay. So you can imagine if you take the passion and enthusiasm that went into that level of responses. I told somebody the other day, and all the times that we've been doing surveys, I don't ever remember getting almost 1,500 responses.
Not even close.
Not even close. And of course, 70% of those were alums. Now, because we forced choice, only one choice at the top, those alums could wear different hats as well, but still 70% from alums. I suspect you wish your giving rate was at 70% of alums, but it was phenomenal. And then I think what we heard from the groups that we met with over the last 2 days was some of that same passion. And Martin and I were talking a few minutes ago, everything we've heard has been consistent. And since we talked a lot about the business of the search committee and the process last time, what we really want to hear from you today is your thoughts around what do you need the next superintendent and what else can you tell us about VMI? For those of you that sat in on a few of our sessions, you kind of heard how we orchestrated getting that information. We'll do a little bit of that, but I want to take a little more targeted approach because there's some very specific things that I would like that the three of us talked about that we would like to bring up that we want your comments on. So if you'll let me be just a little more targeted, please feel free to ask us questions and then we'll be quiet and let you talk to us around those topics. But one of the things that is I wrote down several themes that I think have been persistent throughout the information that we have heard. And this will get to strengths of the institution, opportunities for the institution, what you need in what the perception is what is needed in a new superintendent. But those themes that came out, and I was very succinct here, believe it or not. One is balance. We heard a lot about the three-legged stool and how, in a lot of people's opinion, it's out of balance. So your comments on that will be appreciated. And most of the information that we heard seemed to think that and you guys chip in if I say something incorrectly here, is that the out of balance was the military got elevated at the expense of athletics and academics. Although there are some people that thought athletics might get a little out of balance, but by and large, most people thought the focus on the military was a little out of balance on the three-legged stool and had adverse effects on the academics and the athletics, particularly, which gets to the point of the cadets and their schedule. Martin had a comment about what was needed.
Yeah, so I met with the academic board yesterday and there was a comment that we need to find a superintendent who can create 28 hours a day or 28 hours in a day. And that was a theme that was really consistent in terms of time constraints and how real that is. It was recognized by the coaches, it was recognized by the faculty, it was recognized by the cadets themselves. And so that's something that we heard loud and clear.
Which relays into the next theme is lack of communication or needing better communication. We often heard about the kind of the siloed nature and the communication doesn't cross from academics to the ROTC to the athletics, and that causes scrambling. So there was a wish for much better communication, which kind of translates into the third theme was transparency, which is something you as a group said to us the last time that you want this process to be transparent. I think that was a common theme that we heard throughout our listening sessions. And then really the kind of the big picture umbrella of those three things is unification. That there's a lot of feeling that the VMI community is a bit fractured and or siloed, and that whoever the next leader is really needs to bring a spirit of unification. And that includes balancing, which is kind of the fifth theme, the tradition and hanging on to all that's good, but yet realizing that the higher ed landscape is changing, student population is changing, recruiting is changing. And so how does VMI stay at the forefront of adaptations that allow you to continue to recruit the type of cadet that you want and produce the type of men and women leaders as graduates that'll either be commissioned or go into the business world? And then kind of the last theme was whoever the new superintendent is going to have to be politically savvy, because there are going to be political headwinds regardless of decisions. So those were 6 very common themes. And I would say probably the one that I think I heard the most was the balance and the demand on the cadets, and how do you balance the 3 legs of the stool. So before I go to the next thing, y'all want to miss anything? So any comments you have around that and how it translates to what you're looking for in a new superintendent? So when we ask about what do you need or you want, again, we need, here are kind of the bullets I wrote down, and then I've got some that I wrote it more as questions rather than statements. The statements were good communicator, someone that's transparent, someone whose presence is genuinely there, who's visible and approachable, someone who's politically savvy, someone that has personal accountability and will hold the institute community accountable, from the cadets to the staff, the faculty, and someone who's a unifier. Those were kind of common traits. And we're taking honesty and integrity as givens, right? All right. Where it gets a little murkier is what the background does this person bring? Military, business, and academics. We heard a lot about that, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Then I added into that terminal degree versus non-terminal degree. We heard a lot about alum versus non-alum. What are the options? And then the fundraising experience. So those are specific questions that we want to get to. But bigger picture, if you guys would like to comment on what we have heard in terms of the themes and the common things about these are traits that we need in the new superintendent, we really need to hear your opinions. And then as you bring up things, we'll ask our specific questions. Does that make sense as a way to proceed?
Works for me.
So, and unless you disagree, I don't think anything that I just said that we heard, that we did as a synopsis, is really any different, maybe just a little deeper than what you saw in that survey and what you saw in the notebook LM analysis. I mean, I can go through and point out in this and out some of those exact same things. So that's good. Whenever we're hearing consistent information, I take that as a good sign. Whatever you want to tell us about, what is it you're looking for in a superintendent? What do you think the immediate challenges are for that superintendent? How do you expect them to meet that? When you start evaluating candidates, what's really going to be important for you as you think about your recommendation to the Board of Visitors?
I got 3 things. And we talked about this energy.
Right.
I mean, I don't think this is a young man's game, young man or young woman, whatever we decide to pick. I think they got to have a lot of energy. I think that they've been in leadership positions. It would be great to be a VMI graduate, but I don't think I wouldn't say that's if we found a strong leader and they're not a VMI graduate, I think it's important that they have military experience, whether it's a career military officer or just have some military experience and then have some business experience, because this is a business, fundraising, managing a budget and all that kind of stuff. So it's I would say those are probably my 3 top ones.
So that plays right into one of my questions. I'm just going to jump in and ask now, somebody that can meet all those qualifications and not have a terminal degree. Okay.
Yeah.
Terminal degrees, the PhD, is that the terminal?
PhD, EDD, JD.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, anything above
a master's.
a master's.
I do not think it should be mandatory.
I think if you, I mean, it would be fantastic if they had some business course type experience. You know, there, in the military, there's a lot of, I want to say 6 weeks courses that they give you at, different, not in military schools, but different places. They go over, stuff like that. So.
For myself, I don't think a terminal degree matters much. And to Terry's point, I would take a bit of a different tack. Those types of courses are nice, but actual real world experience in a role that requires the utilization of that knowledge is more important to me. Because I think, I'm not an MBA. I've taken those shared business courses, but it's been the application of that in my professional life that has meant more and has driven the judgment and the wisdom that I think we would be looking for in somebody who would be sitting in that chair.
I think that the data that you've compiled so far and everything that you shared with us, like the 5 or 6 major traits, I don't think that there's probably nobody in here that was a huge surprise to. It's remarkably consistent, kind of year over year over year. So appreciate that. I think one of the things we need is we need the superintendent to be able to not micromanage inside, but he needs to be able to manage inside and outside at the same time. So I think a lot of colleges have a provost, the university president's busy off campus doing whatever he or she's doing. VMI is relatively small, but it takes an awful lot of time, energy, and effort. And I think we need somebody that can look out what's VMI 50 years from now and what are we doing right now without micromanaging to make sure that we're doing the day right. And then I do think the cadets are our number one priority, and we need to always keep that uppermost in our minds. And then I don't want to manipulate the conversation, but one of the things that's been continually frustrating to just about everybody is what we call general order number 1. It's the daily schedule. It's been revised. It's been revised at least twice in the last 5 years. There's a lot of opinions on that, everything from, what time you have dinner roll call formation or is everybody together. So that is an evolving document, but it's probably time that we look to update that document.
That would be very consistent with what we heard a
And we're
lot.
never going to make everybody happy.
Right.
But that doesn't mean we shouldn't, really get at it.
If I could just comment on that, I came up here, my brother went to VCU, RPI at the time. He was an absolute hippie artist. And I came up here and I learned self-discipline and time management. And he didn't know where he was gonna have his next meal, had to find a place, an old row house in Richmond somewhere. And yet everything was done for me. I marched down in the morning and lunch and dinner. I dropped my laundry in a truck, it came back. I had to be in class. I didn't have to do any of that. And yet we're this paragon of time management and all that. So it's a little ironic that those kids out there in other universities have to kind of feel their own way. We sort of beat them into this schedule. I think to me, it's always struck me as odd that we're seen as these people who know how to manage time, but we're just jammed into general order number 1 and we just come out the other end somehow.
Right.
Anyway, just thought. I've got to run. I'm very sorry, but my wife lands in Richmond in 2 hours, so I got to run back. One comment I've said through a number of these sessions. This is a little stray voltage here, but I'm a little concerned about our 3-legged stool being described as academics, athletics, and military. To me, all of that is in a military environment, and we should focus on athletics, academics, and leadership. And because that's the kind of person we're putting out in the field. Nobody cares when you go to work for IBM if you can march and do all that stuff. I mean, it's important here. It's the whole context of this place. It permeates everything. So I prefer to have more of a focus on leadership rather than military as one of those legs. Again, that's just me speaking. But I'm just a little troubled that the connotation of military and Martinet, do as you're told, all that kind of stuff. It's leadership here. And there's so many aspects of leadership these cadets learn. I mean, there's been some discussion of who actually runs the place. These cadets, in a large way, run this institution. And they have tremendous responsibilities that other students at other universities don't have a clue about. They're on the student council and other things. But day-to-day operation of this place is in many ways in the hands of the cadets. So just being here, they get a tremendous leadership. And then we've got our clubs. We should recognize the leadership opportunities there. And in athletics, leadership on the field is just huge. So I prefer to see more of a three-legged stool with those elements than military. But absolutely, as General P used to say, this is a military school, and we use the military environment to produce all these things. But just my comment.
When we survey cadets, before they get here, they and their parents love us. The fourth classmen actually survey pretty well. The freshmen, sophomores, being a third at VMI is a very unique thing. Nobody loves you except your other brother and sister rats. And then by the time they're seconds, they just can't wait to take charge. Then they become first. They think that the institution runs it and they're not in leadership. They really have more practical leadership opportunities than any other school I'm aware of, but they are down on VMI. Man, those first classmen are down on VMI. And then they graduate in May. And when we survey them as one-year alumni, they're like, don't change anything. If you're going to do anything, make it tough. So
I think General Wynn's latest strategy that's been published, developing leaders, is really an important part. Anyway, enough on that. The final thing is, you talk about the connectivity. I think there's a thirst for connection with the superintendent at all levels, from the people who clean the buildings. We never see them on this side of post. We're here at 5 a.m, to the athletes on the sidelines that they make cameo appearances, but they don't come down and talk to the guys at practice, the women on the soccer field. So that ability to operate at all those levels, as you talk outside and inside, but within this, being able to stand and have a real conversation with the cadet on the sidelines means a lot to them. And the same with the professors. They want someone connected with them. So I think that whole idea of connectivity is something that's was repeated throughout the sessions. Well, thank you. I'm going to run. I'll listen on the phone here soon and get up.
Safe travel.
Thank you.
Safe travels. Thank you.
So
But I think kind of like a bigger question, real quick, just, I know that part of this is about developing the profile. But is that the same thing as job description?
Pretty much.
Okay,
Keeping-
so,
Keeping in mind that there's no way you can put everything in a written document.
right,
The written document will, in general, describes the institution, describes Lexington, describes the job, describes, when I say describe the job, some of the duties, and then describes the type of person, the actual profile. Hopefully what that does when people read it is, one, it gives them a sense of what you're looking for, but two, it makes them want to engage with us, so that then we can give them a lot more information.
I just think it would be important to sort of clarify what maybe everyone here, or what the BOV, or what's been written before, what actually is the job description of a superintendent, and there was, I think Martin yesterday asked a question, and Jamie just referred to this about the on-post, off-post sort of percentage of time spent. And I just think like we should probably all have a common idea of, is this job, 90% fundraising? Is it 50% fundraising, 50% being on post? Like, and I know that's sort of what we're at today, but I just wanted to make sure that we kind of are talking about that.
And if I may, let me comment specifically on that one point, because this is the bigger, it'll give a hint of the bigger picture.
Okay.
Some clients may say, we need somebody who established, accomplished fundraising. Well, if that's the case, you're unless somebody's run a nonprofit, you're probably looking at somebody who's been a sitting president or who's been a VP of advancement, because typically those are your most accomplished fundraisers. Someone that might have come from the business world after a military career may have only raised a little bit of money being involved in nonprofits. So that's why it's important on whether it's written down 100%. That's why we have to understand what is important. So we may come in and say, this candidate we think is really good. They really haven't, following this example, they really don't have substantial fundraising experience, but here's what they do have. And here's why we think they may have a proclivity to use their position to help leverage funds based working with the people at the alumni agencies, that type of thing. Does that make sense?
To that point, can I comment on that? Because I've been thinking about this. When you listed sort of the 6 criteria at the beginning, fundraising was one of them. You mentioned it sort of as an aside. From my perspective, I just wanted to say, again, the survey surveyed alumni, staff, a large volume of people. But really the BOV, I think, would be most interested as well, and a third of the budget comes from our foundation. And so someone who can continually drive that has amazing relevance to the success of this school.
And that was one of the things I had as a question is where does fundraising fall? Normally for a president at an institution this size, fundraising can be 50 to 70% of their job, or at least being available so that in your instance, somebody at one of the alumni agencies can set up the president to close the deal, right? Because people want to talk to the CEO, right? They want to see the superintendent. So it can't be a superintendent who wants to sit in their office 90% of the time and not be out. But by the same token, it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who's run a $200 or $300 million. So I wanted some clarity around that. We needed that from you guys.
I think if you listen to what Terry said about somebody having energy, and if you listen to what y'all said about we need a unifier, if you listen to what General Strzok said about somebody who's out and about, and somebody that's got, I mean, you could say charisma or whatever it is, and they have a deep abiding love for the Institute, they'll raise money.
Yeah, I agree that, yeah, but I'm going to grab it. I think the foundation grabs that individual and says, let's go to X, Y, and Z. And like you said, closes the deal. He's not there every day trying to balance the checkbook, but he's the person that they say, come on, let's go to here.
I would say the same thing in this sense that my perspective is that the fundraising is a team sport. And the superintendent is an absolutely necessary element of that. But whether you look at him as the closer or somebody who is the visible face of the enterprise, both of which I think are probably true. Jamie's point, I think, is spot on, that energy and engagement, if we're able to stitch better back together the fabric of our institute community writ large, that the fundraising piece in some respects happens organically. And yes, the foundation will be there to help the superintendent understand particular opportunities or individuals where his or her personal engagement is important to that particular fundraising project. But I think kind of stepping back from that is the superintendent at all times historically has been the person who charts the strategy and the resource requirements, not just today, but over the horizon. And I think in terms of what the superintendent brings to the table, in the first instance, is that ability to see over the horizon. And then if they've got these personal qualities, then they sort of are then able to execute the flip side of that coin, which is actually raise what's required. And that's whether it's coming from the state legislature, private sources of whatever kind. And that's where I think the superintendent's most engaged.
So maybe I might change it somewhat just to say, I understand what we're creating is a job description, a selection criteria, then subsequently a job description. To that end, maybe, and again, this is out of ignorance, I don't know whether the current superintendent has measured for his fundraising goals, but I'd recommend maybe a goal might be part of that selection criteria. Or a willingness to meet a goal, maybe is a different way to say that.
And that would really be a decision ultimately for the Board of Visitors as part of the job performance.
I hear what you're saying, that we don't want to then surprise whoever the final candidate is with, oh, and we didn't talk about this, but this is going to be something that we're going to measure. I take that on board.
Well, it's making sure the institute is financially stable by fundraising, working with, the members of the House of Delegates and the Senate, all, so that whatever, that three-legged stool, whatever, those things.
And we're here to even manage the business operation
Absolutely.
part, whether it's maintenance to the,
Capital improvement.
Right,
capital
all of
improvements.
that. So all that
So this
funnels into.
is jumping way ahead, but when you think about those first round interviews that we briefly talked about, and we talked about the themes that you're going to want to talk to candidates about, one of the themes is fundraising and stewardship. That's a topic that needs to come out in the first interview, beyond what we've addressed with them ahead of time.
Yeah, and that also creates an opportunity for you all to observe the candidates and envision how would they represent VMI to those external constituent groups? Do they have the energy, the personality, the presence, the communication skills to be successful in that capacity?
I just wanted to follow up on the, about the terminal degree. Because when I was at both faculty sessions and then the academic head session, and that is something that is important to a large degree of faculty. I would say at least a master's degree and some experience in higher education. So looking for those leadership opportunities. A university, a college, it's a business in some ways, but it's also not in a lot of ways. And those are very tangible things for the faculty. And so that was a very common theme of a big concern was that someone coming in has had some sort of experience. Maybe it's some teaching, maybe it's having been a dean, maybe it's a master's degree, you know, a PhD, maybe some sort of knowledge, because the language is different, just like military language is different. We should have someone that is willing to learn, but can learn really quickly and not have to come in asking the difference in an assistant versus associate professor, because that's who's working for you. You know, this is your faculty. And so, so I just needed to reiterate that from the faculty's perspective, that academic, higher ed academic experience is very important for that connectivity and the communicating and the leadership managerial perspective of that person.
That's a great segue into one of the things that I mentioned, that I had as a question. I mentioned military business and academics. This is one of the things I wanted to broach with you guys. I'm gonna deviate just a little bit here. Several people ask us how many quote applicants we've had already. And my response to that question was, since it became known that we were going to be the search firm, between the three of us, we have probably been directly contacted by close to 25 people. And then Terry gave me some recommendations. So all total, maybe 35 people that in one way, shape or form have expressed some interest or that we will reach out to.
Is that a lot?
Considering we've done no
Haven't done
sourcing,
anything?
yes,
I mean,
yes.
no, we haven't
It's a
gone
lot.
into it.
But here's the but to that. Now, well, two buts. One is until we engage with them, we don't know if they're interested or not. You know, there are lots of things we have to find out. Some of them are just referrals that we may reach out to, they may not respond. But some of them have sent us their information and said, I'm interested. Some of those people are 100% military, no business experience, no academic experience. So our mantra is generally think broadly, interview broadly, hire as narrowly as you want to, but that negates the academic experience. Our thought would be we will bring anybody we think is a qualified leader and let you guys make those decisions. But we do need a little clarity around that, because a number of those people who could be great leaders may not have any business or academic experience.
Or even fundraising.
One of the things I wanted to say, to add on to what Abby said is, I think if you have a senior military retired officer that's coming in here, they have to realize that VMI is a college. It's not the 82nd Airborne Division. It's not the 2nd Marine Division. It is a college, as in General Stuck said, within a military environment. Then I would recommend that we not screen anybody out. If somebody's purely military and they made it to flag or general officer rank, at a very minimum, they've been to 3 or 4 or 5 schools, senior level schools.
And I'll just add something. I know a couple of people that recommended or sent you the infos on are nuclear power trained. I don't know if you know that how long it takes to become a nuclear, trained officer. I mean, you're running a nuclear power plant.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's high level training that the Navy goes to. So I'm not that they don't understand it, maybe an assistant professor or an active, but to be a commanding officer of a aircraft carrier, you have to go to nuclear power school. And that's as hard as any curriculum anywhere.
The only thing that may be,
Go ahead, Jamie. I don't want to cold call Jim, so we don't forget he's on the line.
the only thing that may be harder than that's leading faculty. So I think, and I think.
Actually, I've just got a couple of quick comments. I'll try not to say too much, but I think what Terry and Jamie are saying is spot on. If we get a really senior level military leader, they should have, and we're careful who we pick, and it's a good fit. They should have the skills to be able to work through the dean as it relates to academia and that aspect of VMI. And they've got to have the personality and the charisma and be a good listener as it relates to the professors, because it is a college. One other comment though, and as we talk about the three-legged stool, I just hope we don't lose sight of this. And I'm sure I'm stating the obvious, but VMI is a military college in Virginia. The more the military aspect is diluted, the less VMI is relevant, and the more one would look at the school and say, let's just roll it into VPI or someplace else. We are a military school. Our mission is to produce citizen soldiers. That structure is what has allowed the school to be successful for, I don't know what it is now, 150 years, 160 years. And so that aspect of it's very important. One last comment is, as we're talking about relationships, there's one piece that I didn't see that I think really should be included. Relationships with the faculty, relationships with students, relationships with staff, relationships with the legislature. Another is it would be really nice to get a superintendent who has a very strong network on the national level in terms of has relationships with company presidents, people that have been at the very pinnacle of power in the nation, because that's where we're going to get money. That's where we're going to get support. That's where we're going to get influence. And so that network, I see, if someone comes in and they don't have that, I see that as a deal breaker. We've got to have somebody of significance that's got that kind of influence and those kind of relationships. And that's it. That's all I have to say on it. Thanks, Ernie.
You said sort of first interviews and things that you would want to hear people talking about. To me, one of the facets of leadership is how they have built, recruited, and trained their team and the people that report to them. It's incredibly important. And I want to hear how they think about that, how their philosophy is about that. And the other piece I'll put on the table is that I think something that is equivalent to dealing with a board in one's background. And I would not take anybody off the table that doesn't meet, wear all three hats. I think there are people that kind of bring in all three facets and not actually have the leadership skills that we want. And so I'm hesitant to say have to have experience working with a corporate board or in some sort of board capacity, but something that they can speak to that allows us to know that they understand how that works. Because I think that's an additional layer to the outside, to the inside, and then also to the folks that fill a role within the Commonwealth in the way that we're structured.
And that's a great point, because so often these profiles or these discussions, we kind of define somebody that walks on water. And I've never met a perfect candidate. But one of the things that you guys will be charged to do when you start evaluating candidates is for those candidates that don't possess all 7 out of 7 or whatever it is where can you make the trade-offs? And where do you think someone can be developed or can supplement with hiring and developing a staff that might complement them, right? But that's where you guys will make those decisions.
Can I make another cold call? Because although his face is not on the screen, Bill Janis is also on the phone. So Bill, give you a chance to chime in if you can.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, thanks, Ernie. I guess I was just gonna say what the previous speaker just said, which is we're building a profile, but the last perfect man, we're celebrating the fact that he rose from the dead on Sunday, right? I mean, we're never gonna get a candidate that's gonna check every single one of these boxes. And a lot of these boxes, when the faculty says, I'm looking for somebody with a graduate degree that has some experience in higher ed, right? Or when I hear Jim Joustra say, got to be a military man or a military woman because this is a military school, there are proxies for those things, right? So you may not get a general. I mean, it passed the prologue. We've had general officers for a lot of these superintendents, but that's a title. What we have to do is look behind the title to what's sort of the skill set that a general officer or a flag officer generally brings to a task. Are there proxies for that, not in the military, in the private sector, or in academia? So we're going to build a sort of a profile of the perfect candidate, but we have to be prepared to maybe go a level of abstraction above what the specific requirements are that we're listing out here, and say, okay, this person did not earn 3 stars in the United States Marine Corps, but look at this experience over here at IBM and look at that and see how in character they're very similar in the skills and abilities and accomplishments and achievements that they bring to the job. The other thing I wanted to say was, if you take all of these requirements to a level of abstraction removed from all of them, I think what we're looking for is an inspirational leader, right? When we talk about fundraising, how do you get people to give money to VMI? You inspire them. And generally speaking, we inspire with the spoken word. We need to have somebody who can tell the VMI story in such a way that it inspires and engenders support, dollars and cents support. When they go to see the legislature, they have to go into the office of a senator or a delegate, and they have to tell the VMI story in such a way that it inspires them to support VMI, not just financially in the budget, but to say, I think what's happening in VMI is important for the taxpayers of Virginia and for my constituents. So if you take all of these sort of criteria, and above them, I think what we need is, we're looking for an inspirational leader, somebody that can inspire the cadets to achieve their very best and use every last second of their time at VMI because it's finite and irreplaceable. They're only there 4 years, and there's a lot to be done. That they can inspire the faculty, and that the faculty can know that they have a friend in Smith Hall that understands that, yeah, we're a university, we're a college, and what we do here is the I in VMI is the scholastics, it's the institute, right? And so forth and so on. We need somebody that's got leadership, inspirational leadership, and I think probably it's going to be a military person, but there's no reason why it couldn't be somebody who has some military experience, but was not a career military officer and was not a flag officer or a general officer. Last thing, the survey information about, I can't remember the term. The term was scurrying around or harried or something about the time being, always sort of not enough time, not enough hours in the day. Well, my recollection is now 40 years old, but I don't remember ever sitting around and having a lot of free time on my hands when I was in barracks. So I'm not sure that that's a novel situation. I think part of making educated and honorable young men and women is teaching them time management. And the way you do that is by challenging them and by placing demands on that 24-hour a day of theirs. And they should be busy all the time. And I don't remember ever feeling that I had plenty of time to get something done. I was always up against the deadline. I was always late for turning in a term paper or scurrying to get the formation on time or frantically shining my shoes after tasks when the lights were off because there weren't enough hours in the day. And I think that's part of the teaching methodology. That's part of the pedagogy, if you will, of VMI. That's all I had. Thanks, Ernie.
A couple things I wrote down. You obviously had a chance to hear me yesterday, but we definitely need somebody that's engaged at multiple levels, because there's a lot of different stakeholders that this person will be working with. We need someone that's empowered and empowered others, because, you know, whether you're a cadet, whether you're on staff, whether you're a coach, we all got to work together. We all got to empower each other. So I think it's got to start at the top with empowerment, and then the experience. The reason why we work here, the reason why we go to school here, the reason why we love this school is because of the experience, shared experiences that we have as cadets. So I think we've got to figure out who can provide an experience that we will all be proud of. And it's not going to be perfect, but I think it's also a realistic experience, because this isn't 1839. This isn't, 1985, 2007. This is 2025. What is the realistic experience that we want out of our next leader? And I think with that, by empowering others and being engaged, we can get to and move forward in a really good way. But I think, as we were just saying, we're never going to get the perfect person, but I think this person really has to place a value in the experience and how we can really make their experience the best experience possible. And that usually will make everybody around the cadets feel more appreciated, because they're seeing that from top to bottom. But and being an athletic director and going through this year in the chair, one of the things I also realized, even with the fundraising piece, I didn't have a lot of fundraising experience within athletics, but when you have others around you that specify or work in that daily, the Cadet Club will say, Jamal, hey, here is somebody that's passionate about this particular area. This is a priority that's in our operations plan or strategic plan. That's matched that together. So I think the teamwork mindset is going to be huge too. Who is someone that's worked at a level where they can sit at this table with the team, empower that person to do their job, and know when to be nose in and fingers out, but also know when they got to make the call for the institute. So those are things I think that are pretty important.
So I'm not gonna embarrass you here, but last night when we were with this cadet athlete, they said, look, you can't hire Jamal because we need him as the AD, but if he has a twin, you need to hire him. So I'm just passing that along. They would have ended the search last night and they just promoted him.
Have you spent your night in barracks yet?
Yes, sir. That was fun.
You've relived everybody's nightmare. The rest of us lie awake at night with the bad dream of they're making me spend another night in barracks.
Well, I mean, that's a good enthusiasm. There is an example. of enthusiasm.
Right.
I mean, you when you sit in the room with, it knocks you back. So if you could clone that, put it in your papers.
Yeah.
It's a bigger job than an AD job, I'll tell you that.
It's not a 9-to-5 job. It's a job that's
Always on.
24/7. I think you get a small lull in the summer, but not really. I mean, it's someone that lives and breathes. As a cadet, I knew I could knock on General Bunning's door at any hour of the night and he would answer and he would talk to me. We're a small school. One of the main reasons I came here was because it was a small school. I wanted the relationship with my professors. I wanted the relationship with my BRs. And one of the big things that we take pride in is our network and that bond that we have. And so someone that, comes here and preserves that, what makes us develop that bond, I think is important. People choose to come here for the VMI experience, not so much for the majors or something that you don't have, aerospace major or whatever. That's fine. Put me in biology, or I can't get into chemistry, put me in, whatever. I still want to come because, and you can go to admissions and listen, and they'll tell you that people want the VMI experience. So someone that has a love for VMI and is willing to live and breathe it while he's here or she's here, is just vital. And to Jamal's point, you know, that personal, as my time on the board and talking to the faculty and the administration. I mean, and again, we're such a small school, and I think we all come here for that bond and those relationships. It's got to be someone that checks in, like, hey, so and so, how's your dog? Like, you know, that constant interaction, you know, and not, oh, well, call him, he's on the golf course, you know, and get an answer that way. I want someone that gets up and walks post, you know, just to check, do a little survey of on a weekly basis, or but yeah, I want to be able to call up here as a board member on the foundation and be able to talk to someone on Sunday afternoon, because I'm working and I have Sunday afternoon off to do my job, like for the school. And I want them to answer enthusiastically and answer my question. And so that's what I expect, someone that was going to immerse themselves.
Thanks.
One thing I kind of hear is that it's not necessarily, I mean, I know sort of everyone's ideal would be this general with a PhD who ran a business, who was a politician, you know, but just kind of going back to something that you said and that connects it all is maybe it's an or, you know, or military or academics or this, but just the idea of being a leader who can manage people, because they're not, this person is not the one that's making, I mean, yeah, they're signing off on everything. The BOV signs off on everything above that. But they have to be someone who can recruit and manage and keep people here who are good and be able to make those hard calls if somebody's not doing their job. So I think just that overall leadership quality, not maybe how they got there isn't necessarily as important, is that they have that.
Yeah, and the other, they need to be thick-skinned. This is not for the meek of heart.
Hmm.
Because you're taking counter battery every day. I mean, it's from the alumni, General Assembly, cadets, it's
I want to go back to something you said about the duties. For a president or superintendent of an institution this size, some of the duties are going to be the same from institution to institution. So part of what you read in a description, you could probably say it about a number of institutions. There will be some things in there obviously unique to VMI, but the real piece of this that helps us understand what you're looking for is defining the actual profile of the leader, which is what we've really been doing here. So some of that's a long way of saying some of the things in the actual job description would look fairly similar regardless of which school you go to. Right. What else do we need to know?
I know I came in, because came in a little late here, kind of get what some feedback of what may have been shared prior to the meeting getting started. I guess, my point of view, I think, I don't think we can get the perfect candidate. I think that's realistic in so many ways. But either we talk about, a good fundraiser, that's one characteristic or skill set of someone. I think it more of a strategic thinker that really can, which goes along some of the lines of you saying how you manage people and then put them in position to do their job well, be engaged. I think that part of that strategic thinking is a huge plus. Again, I think I think some of the characteristics that we embody here at VMI, strong character, honor, integrity, because that's what we preach as VMI men and women. That's what we produce. Those that go beyond what's expected. Not only on the civilian side, but also on the military side. So to whom he or she may be, they can, put those two things together, because that's what they're representing. And we talk about, we always talk about embracing the three-legged stool, and that's, And that's which I take from my personal side of, that's what life is about, with the athletics. So that's, you're challenged in ways that, you bring out the best of you, bring the best of you. We're challenged definitely from academic standpoint. And then you had offerings of that from the military, where you can take that further and leading people in different ways, which still take you to the corporate offices as well. But being a military school, you may see that more often than not. But I think someone that can, to your point, Laura, being a small school that can, guide and direct our direction. And why are we still relevant as a military institution? That has to be important too. You think about what's going around in the world, a lot of things are changing, but we got better to adjust. And that's how we prepare ourselves to be leaders, because you got to better adjust. And but at the same time, keep the same honor, integrity, and that involved with that. So that's kind of things that kind of came from what I think about superintendent or president of the university. Those types of attributes.
Thank you.
I'm gonna do one more cold call because our last member of our committee, Will Collier's been able to join online as well. So Will, I want to give you a chance to chime in. If there's anything you want to say.
Yes, sir. First of all, I apologize for being tardy. Had a work issue pop up. But I would be remiss without mentioning a lot of the alumni that I've spoke to from various decades have stressed their want and the need to ensure that a rigorous military program that follows the traditional values that VMI has promoted, obviously honor and military and citizen service, that those things are at the forefront of everything that we do, and that the person who is leading the organization is very well versed and understands that the alumni and the school takes pride in being the toughest military school. And that is something that they want to continue. So I wanted to bring that forward. Thank you.
Not that it's a segue, but as I've heard the comments, it's probably more for my colleagues on the search committee than it really is for you all. And when we talk about what we see in the ideal candidate and the position description, I reflect back on my professional life and the people that I've hired, and no one has ever checked all the boxes. We've kind of acknowledged that, but I just want to underscore that no one checks all the boxes. Really, when we talk about the ideal superintendent, it's when that person's been in the job for a little while and they're hitting on all cylinders. They've now mastered the learning curve, and this is where they're going to be for the duration of their tenure, however many more years that is. And so I guess it's more of a cautionary note as much as anything else. We're not going to find, somebody said golden unicorn, maybe this session or the earlier one, but we are going to find somebody who checks many of the boxes. And the real question, I think, in our minds is, does that person have the potential to then grow in this role, which that person in all likelihood has never done before? And so there's got to be learning. The attraction of this role is that they're going to get something out of it. They're going to learn something along the way and then be able to utilize that wisdom. And so I guess that's really it, is let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. But in the old line of the promotion order, right? I mean, the key word there is potential for future advancement and service. That's what I think what we're looking for. Someone's got the potential to check in those other blocks. So that's more of the observation than a point.
Can we cover strategic vision, not strategic plan, but what the individual strategic vision?
Damon kind of
Okay, I just want to make
with
sure.
the strategic thinking.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mentioned it when you're looking out 25 years, you need to be able to do that. And you also need to run the
Right.
place today.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, what that individual sees, not here's my, in paper, but what that individual sees now.
I think the person needs to have love for, if not for the Institute, which, would depending on what he or she knew about it, but you know, love or passion for young people, education, or uniqueness, because you want somebody that's passionate. Because it is a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and if you're not passionate about it, won't achieve everything we want him or her to achieve.
So I want to, you started that by saying a lot of it's may depend on whether the person has some information about VMI or could learn it. So one of the things that I think that came up more in the survey and more in our listening sessions than I've heard it here. I've heard it mentioned, I think twice here, both as it's not a requirement. There are a lot of people who think it's really strongly that someone needs to be an alum. So I think you mentioned it didn't have to be, and you mentioned it didn't have to be, in your
I
opinion.
think we said if we're looking at a broad net, I wouldn't strike anybody from making the list.
Okay.
I think it would take an extraordinary, not impossible, but an extraordinary set of circumstances, but it could happen.
Right.
General Lejeune was a pretty good superintendent. Is he the only
Walker.
Walker. But he had done a semester here, I think, or a year.
At least a rat year.
Yeah, he did a rat year, yeah. But my 2 cents for it.
So the consensus is, I just want to make sure we look broadly.
Absolutely. I
but-
would not eliminate anybody because they're not a VMI grad.
Do you agree with that?
We can always
I
say.
agree. I mean, I think that, to your point, I mean, as we interview people and get the sense, I mean, I think the list will organically shrink down in the funnel as we go through the interviews. I 100% agree. You don't strike anybody simply because they didn't graduate from here. But I think as we do the talking and the interviewing and we hear the answers back, we'll see, you know, is there an extraordinary set of candidates who are not graduates, but who are saying all the things and can demonstrate all the things that we're looking for. And I think it's incumbent on us to be open-minded enough to consider not just them as candidates, but picture them living in 412. And is this something that will work? I'll readily admit, and I heard it in the classified briefing, actually, where the folks who sometimes make hourly wages are insisting that it be a graduate. And that's an interesting perspective. But I think we're obliged to be open-minded, and then we just see how, in the interviews, how the finalist list takes shape.
And sometimes it's family members that have been here. So
They've
they
sent their
grew
sons and
up
daughters-
with
they've
them,
sent their
right.
sons and daughters here, and that's how they've been associated with it. So,
So we don't
Right.
have to.
One of the other things that, I've been thinking about with this particular person, in athletics right now, we're building a mission statement and we're building a vision statement, and, we're creating a vision statement, and, the vision statement is, what do we aspire to be, right? So today I was looking at, you got surviving and you got thriving. So I want to have someone that's taking this job that wants to thrive, not survive, So just like in athletics, I want to win, I know there's some things we want to progress to get to. This is a changing landscape for me in the role that I sit in, but how can this person come here and make this place thrive? We don't want to survive. We want to thrive, So what are the things that this person brings to the table with their vision and with what they're planning on doing, to where we can look at 3, 4, 5 years from now? As you said, it's going to take some time to kind of understand, but are we thriving with this particular person down the road?
Anything else anybody would like to add? So I want to go back and emphasize, Terry's done a great job of this. That last question on the survey is if there's anybody that you want us to contact, either source of referrals, et cetera. If you think of anybody that you didn't respond on the survey, man, Terry pushed it out to the Flag Network. He also gave me some names of people to contact. We don't want to overlook anybody or anything. So if somebody comes to mind, please let us know. The dedicated email for this address, which will be on the profile that we'll send you to approve, will be VMISuperintendent@buffkinbaker.com. So that will be on that profile. Did all of you get access to the portal Is that how you shared that information?
Yes.
Okay, so anybody have trouble accessing the portal or anything? Because that's the same portal that once we get ready to present candidates, we will share the candidate information in. And we'll communicate that to Jamie and Ernie once, we start adding things there. One other thing that I'll just quickly mention, and some of you that were in the meetings heard this, we got to ask, there was one faculty forum session that I ended up in by myself because they were in another session. And I maybe got 20, 30 minutes of feedback and 30 minutes of questions. Ernie was in that session. And that session and several others that came up, well, what about this August 1st deadline? And is this a done deal already we know who they're going to appoint? So the way we responded to that is that, from the search committee, we have been told to look for the best candidate, that this is not a preordained, we've been given no direction to focus, very limited on one or a few people, that we were told to do a full search and to find the best candidate possible, and that August 1st was a target, but that you had made it unequivocally clear that you weren't going to sacrifice quality or getting the right candidate to try to hit an artificial target. That seemed to satisfy that question, but we did get asked that. I think I personally got asked at least 3 times, probably. So
I would say most of the sessions where I sat in, that question came up.
It is 100% not a done deal. I have no idea who the next superintendent's going to be, and
neither do we right now.
yeah, so I really wish that people, would believe us.
I think your answer was right on the.
Your answer was fantastic.
Well, it was just repeating what I heard you say, so I can't take any credit.
Thank you.
One thing that raises though, and in my own mind, I haven't really decided what's the wisest course of action to pursue. And it comes from this. If you don't, there was a lot of talk about communication and how we as a community don't do a particularly good job of telling our story, with which I could not agree more. So let's narrow it down to the search committee, and how much, if at all, do we want to convey some kind of message out to our community that answers those very questions? And I am conflicted on that. I think if we just go about our business, the result will speak for itself. But I also know that there are people who, don't confuse me with the facts because my mind's made up, and maybe some communication directed towards that might help. But then I say, well, if their mind's made up, it's not that I can do to change their mind anyway. So why worry about them? Stay focused on the direction we're heading. So I throw that out there, not for any kind of consensus today, but is the question I would pose is, do we want to have any kind of communication, passive or active, to our community writ large about what we're doing and why, to dispel precisely that rumor? You don't have to answer today.
Yeah, hey, Ernie, I got an answer for you right now. It's Bill. Hello.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we got a beautiful webpage. I don't understand why, if this was a frequently asked question at the fora that we just had, why we wouldn't just have frequently asked questions on that page that basically address, if somebody asks a question in every single session you all sat in, or multiple times in each session, it seems to me like an easy way to forego that and to engender confidence and trust that we're being transparent is just have some frequently asked questions. And I don't know if we want to give, Jamie and Ernie sort of editorial control over that with the answers working together with the firm. But it seems to me, if you have frequently asked questions, the best practice would be to put those frequently asked questions out ahead of time before they get asked. Asked and answered,
Yeah, okay.
Would also recommend from the alumni side, that very topic comes up all the time of, are we, again, going for a timeline or for the right candidate? And the position, I think, needs to be reiterated often, and or somewhere, a website, something with the frequently asked questions where that is addressed and it's brought up, so that people, as they continue to ask the question, we continue to answer it. And perhaps on any communication we give out, that we are looking for the right candidate, not a timeline.
Great. Thank y'all both.
Assuming you choose to do that, which I think is probably a good idea, then I think you can communicate in bullet updates. So for example, the first update could be the consultants from Buffkin Baker visited post on April 21, 22 and listened to stakeholders. And that's really about as simple as it needs to be, but it's an update. And then once you guys approve the position profile, you can say search committee approved the profile, here it is, post it there. And so you're filtering out transparent communication. It doesn't have to be extensive, but someone can kind of see that you're giving them.
I know on our search website, and Bill's going to it now on the screen, we've got, website plaques that sort of speak to the milestones we've already achieved. And I think probably exactly what you're talking about now.
Yeah.
But there's not I know it's not an FAQ site, which maybe that's something we want to add on to.
And might I recommend we use either TAPS or the alumni review and not emails to direct people to wherever that information is found? I think the emails we're finding that if we pepper alumni too much with one-off emails, that will get people unsubscribing. But if we're putting them in the turnouts that get published or the alumni review, those documents are things that people look at and not have a huge write-up. We don't need to write War and Peace, but have a questions on the superintendent search can be found here.
Sure. Yeah, those are good ideas. Thanks, Will.
Can I make one other just quick comment kind of about the process again? I believe there's one group that you still have to meet with, and it was two groups. How can we get the feedback from those meetings? I know, and I don't want to sound like a one-trick pony, but I know one of the groups is our most loyal and a handful of loyal and generous donors. And I'd love to hear their feedback if at all.
You do that several ways, but probably the most efficient, quickest way is that we'll just write some bullet points based on what we hear, and we'll just post it in the portal, and then you can just download it. It'll just be our version of the Survey Monkey.
Sure. Yeah.
So that'd probably be the most efficient way.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And y'all don't have the dates yet lined up for those two. Okay.
Bill's working on it.
Okay.
Yeah. No, not yet. I do have one question for you guys from our last meeting. Have you gotten your charge from the board yet?
It's in process. But we have the formal spring meeting of the board is May 1st through 3rd. And if we don't have it before then, we will have it by the time we walk out the door.
Okay. And we're joining on that Friday for a short period, 12:30. So, okay. Any other questions? Any other comments?
From the phone, anything for the team?
I think we're on the right track.
So we'll draft a profile. Do you want us to email that to the two of you, or just put it in the portal and let you know it's in there?
Does it matter either way?
Same.
Okay.
You can just put it on the portal and let us know it's there.
Yeah. Okay. And by the way, I think I said this at the last meeting. I'll say it again. In writing the description of the Institute and Lexington, plagiarism is not something I'll worry about, because there's no reason to recreate the world if there's good language already there. So that's right. So
the best is assume that y'all do this for a living. So if you've got anything, we don't need to wait to the end. If there's anything we can do better, if they're best practices, why not? We can, whatever we need to do to get all of the bang out of our buck. So let us know if there's something that we can adjust. We'll be happy. So far, so good. The one thing you might want to plug in is like, go to the bottom. This is really forward looking. And I think the last meeting we were talking a little bit about this. When you think about what's supposed to
think about sitting around a table like this and having a dinner table discussion, and what are the topics you're going to want to cover. We could probably rattle them off pretty quickly, but the topics you want to cover, because you're going to want to try to get the candidates talking about those things. and sharing information. So going ahead and starting to develop those to make sure that you are going to cover what you want to cover.
Have you seen in the past that those are pretty tightly scripted, or is it more improvisational, or?
I think the more improvisational, the better. Now, having said that, I do think you want to have a set of topics that you make sure you're going to cover.
Yeah.
But how they get covered may be different. So for example, and this is why I say improvisational, what we generally recommend is that, well, stop me if I get too far into details, but I'll give you a glimpse. I think we will make sure that all the candidates that are gonna come in and meet with you have your background so they can read about you before they come in, because you've read about them. And if you have name placards, then we're not wasting any time of that meet in doing introductions. We'll put them in the seat, you say hello, and then we generally recommend that you ask them to make an opening statement, no more than about 5 minutes. The topic is generally, so why are you interested in being the
Why
superintendent?
VMI, why now?
Why VMI, why now? So they may say something in that statement that the person that's going to address fundraising wants to kick right in with the fundraising question. Whereas it may be something in the statement that the person that's going to talk about how they hire, develop, and retain leaders wants to jump in. And I don't think it should be so scripted that you have to go in any certain order, because if you think about a dinner table conversation amongst colleagues who all have a common interest, you can bounce around a lot and still get the information covered. And the whole goal is to get them talking, because the more they talk, the more information you're going to get. And you just got to make sure that you interject the right topics so you're talking about the right subjects. That's why I think it's kind of like giving a speech and having an outline, but not knowing exactly what you're going to say. You've got the outline, and then you're going to let it develop organically.
Also, at this level, people haven't interviewed in a while, and to be honest, I don't care how experienced they're nervous. So this helps kind of lower the temperature, they get comfortable, and then you can really see who they are. Sometimes when I see really scripted questions, it's like a formal interview and they have a different persona than when they start talking about other things. So those are just little techniques.
I refer to it as dinner table conversation versus airline cockpit. My apologies to any pilot in here, but if you're going through a checklist and you're checking, that's not what you won't get as good of information or as quality of it, or the amount of information if that's the way you conduct the interview, in our opinion.
However, I would add that we probably eventually check with legal to make sure that, with sort of anti-discrimination policies and such. I know that hiring at the faculty level, like there's a very, it's not necessarily a script, but you do have to ask certain questions in a certain way, avoid all of that. I think we probably, if no one's been on a search committee before or followed through with those legalities.
Yeah. It's not a bad idea to get advice on what you can't talk about. Right.
But I think where you're going is making sure that you're asking, we'll call them the themes to all the questions, so you're judging the candidates equally
Yes.
based on the same themes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is, I think if you start thinking about what those themes are now, you'll have that consistency to make sure you're asking each person on those themes. Now, the other thing I think you'll find is if you ask really good open-ended questions, people can self-disclose a lot of things. It's amazing what people tell you if you just ask a question and be quiet. Yeah, I've been doing this 40 years and it amazes me what people will tell me.
I know something just happened with a candidate for another search, and I went, only you would they have told that to.
Just asking was quiet. I can be quiet when I have to. I do not always talk. So.
Any questions from the team though for Buck and Baker?
Is it worth discussing or bringing up now? I know we're early in the process here, but in the event that the candidate that we bring forward present to the governor is not approved, are we going to have any contingency plan in that case?
Well, the candidate's selected by the board, not by the governor. So that I think what you're really asking is how do we get to that final step from a list of finalists to the final one, and to be fair, that's something that we haven't totally fleshed out. I'm looking at Jamie as I say that, and we touched on that a little bit 2 weeks ago, and and we got a very congenial answer, which was we can kick the can on that a little bit, so we're still kicking. But we do need to come to, I think, an understanding of how we go from a final group that maybe does on-post interviews to the final candidate that the board selects. And that's something that probably, as we get into the process of the position description, get that out the door, that's something that we hone in on. Jamie, am I saying it right? Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else for the good of the cause?
No, I appreciate everybody that took the time to either join online or come in here, and appreciate all your time, energy, and effort. It's important we get this right, and we're very thankful for all your work. So thanks a lot.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Thanks for allowing us to be part of it.
Jamie, thank you for nominating